Hello, this is Sudhakar Moparty. Today we're going to look at how Amazon S3 authorizes a request. And these are for two types of authorization, for a bucket operation or a object operation. So it has user context, bucket context, and then some examples. And for object operations, uh, object access, object request, and the flow chart and some examples. Then bucket operation, how the buckets operations are allowed or denied. All that they're explaining with different scenarios. Okay, so that's the English version of it. So now let's switch to our C1, C2 version of it. Okay, so here, so basically all these uh, circles or the so-called circles, ellipses, is user context authorized account request. So they're all different entities or classes, and there's stars are those objects. So we have two different accounts, and there are some users. And those users, when they make a request, um, we will form an IAM principal, and whatever policies that they are attached to, we will evaluate them. And if it is a role, if the request is coming, they're assuming a role, we will take that role and then we'll evaluate the policy, attach it to that. Or if it is a user group, the IAM principal can be any one of these things. So we'll just go and grab that policy and evaluate. If it comes yes, so that means is user context authorized. So whenever you see is, like is user context authorized, is explicit denied, is access denied, there are only two possibilities, yes or no. Okay. So just I'm not going to write those in every object, but from now onwards, anytime you see yes, either it is an yes or a no. All right. So let's say you make a request. So let's do two different operations, bucket and object. So I'm going to draw some arrows now. Uh, so there's a request that comes uh, that belongs to a particular account. The request is coming, and obviously there is a user. Let's say in this request, you have an account, and then there is a user making that request, and whether they are requesting a bucket operation or an object operation. Let's take it as a bucket operation. So the bucket operation. So they're requesting for this bucket. Okay. And this is a user. So we will have a principal, obviously, because and that principal, because this user has this policy, and this principal will be allowed or denied. So at any point of time, if it is denied, let's say this is granted, means from user context point of view, it is granted. This is yes. This is no. Okay. And as this it is evaluating. So if this is comes as no, then it will be denied. Okay, it will be denied. So if this is done, this is yes, then it will go and look at for this bucket policy. Bucket policy. Let's say it has this policy attached to this bucket, and it will make sure that the bucket operation is allowed by that user using this policy. In this policy, this should be allowed. So if that comes as yes, is bucket context authorized. All right, let's assume that this circle represents that is bucket authorized. Type that is bucket context authorized. If that is yes, then we're good. Then if this is yes, then we can say it is yes, access granted. And before evaluating this, okay, let's see, is explicitly denied. If this is explicitly denied, so there is a policy in this policy about this bucket that is attached. If that evaluates to explicit denial, if this is attached, this whole thing gets evaluated on the fly. Okay, I'm just showing them in terms of C1 C2 diagrams so that these flags will change in the algorithm as the flow. It is evaluating one after the other, one after the other. So all these flags will be set or unset, and finally, either is granted, is access granted, is explicit, is granted, yes or no. This is the answer. So if it comes to this, no, then it is denied. And if it comes to here, it is allowed. So all these arrows will basically, it takes a path. So the request comes and then it evaluates whether it is a user, role, or a group, and builds the IAM principle, and then evaluates the policy and remembers whether it is context is authorized or not. Does it belong to that same account? This principle should be granted permission from that account. So that's what this policy will allow you. The parent account, because this request is coming from this account. And the bucket owner could be, sometimes the owner could be the same account, or it could be a different account. The owner, the bucket is owned by this account. So depending upon who is the owner, then you need to, that policy also should be permitting that you can do that operation. So it is, if you think about it, I'm going to just get rid of all these arrows now. And it's pretty simple. You have user context and you have bucket context. You evaluate the user is allowed or not, or principal. Here I want to say use the word principal because principal consists of user, role, group, and all that. And then once the user is authorized, then you evaluate the bucket policy evaluation, and if both come as yes, then you are granted. Otherwise, you are not granted. Right. Similarly, objects as well. I mean, it's the same concept. So there is slightly more will be involved because who is the owner of this object? Is this owner this account or this account? From where the request is coming? If depending upon that, this object will be allowed or authorized or not authorized. Okay, so let's clear some of these arrows because they're pretty obvious. So this type of dynamic valuation and building those connections as the algorithm is evaluating based upon the information coming within this request is what algorithm execution, And so now let's look at it one more time and then we are done. So there is a request and there's a user or group principal. They're all principals. Anything principal means, one of these. You have a policy because the roles have policies, users have policies, groups have policies. Evaluate. If yes, flag that. If that is good, then you go and see the request for what bucket and who is the owner of that bucket, which account, and then evaluate that policy from policy attachment that is already there, for this bucket. And if the bucket is authorized, then you are good, and then access granted. Because of this policy, sometimes in this policy I can mention explicitly denied. So then at that point, this will overtake, and then the answer is no, and that means I will not be permitted. So that's bucket. And then for objects, we need one more check. Instead of bucket, you'll use this bucket and bucket object and object policy, or if object policies, object attached policies or ACLs are not there, are evaluated. Oh, we're missing one more ACL. So maybe I should just draw one more. So just to represent ACLs. ACL, access control lists. We don't want to use ACLs much, We want to operate through bucket policies or user policies. But we talked about this when to use ACLs in one of our previous videos. Okay, so that's all it is. So when you look at this, you need to graphically imagine, okay, what would be happening kind of thing. Oh, there are some accounts requests coming in. We can keep track of all the requests. There are some lookup tables here, users, roles, groups, and policies, buckets, objects, and is context authorized, user context authorized will be evaluated dynamically. The kind of transaction entities. And then if that is done, then you flag that request as access granted. Access granted. In some other case, it will be access not granted. All right, that's all I have for today. Good luck. Bye.